You gotta put a gate on it.
If you like it, then you should have put a gate on it. If you like it, then you should have put a gate on
it. Guys! Come on! Butterscotch Shenanigans. Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and I do web stuff.
I'm Sam, and I make art things.
And before we get started, we have a quick warning. Anything can happen on this show. We sometimes get a little rambunctious, possibly even rowdy. So if you're sensitive, if you have feelings, you should not listen to this podcast.
This podcast is for psychopaths only.
And for people with Capgras syndrome.
What is Capgras syndrome?
Isn't that the one where you literally can't feel pain? I'm pretty sure.
If you can't feel pain, this podcast is for you.
That's right.
So speaking of pain,
yeah, speak of it.
Our first news item of the day is a mysterious one. It has something to do with Adam's hot butt.
That's right.
Which
I'm very keen on hearing this.
I don't know what this means. So hit us with the butt.
Okay,
Adam.
so I recently developed the hot butt, and what this is like I said, it's a term that I made up, but what it is a frequent and sudden warm sensation just in my butt cheek.
Which one?
Which one?
The left butt cheek. I'm glad that was so important that both of you had to ask that question.
Well, I mean, if it had been the right one, I would say you should probably see a doctor. But
yeah, but it's the left one, so it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, if you're right butt cheeked, you don't even need to worry about really anything.
No, it's basically my decorative butt cheek, so it's really just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I personally spend a lot of time sort of doing training and stuff, so I'm ambi-butted. I can
ambi-butt cheek.
I can use both cheeks. Yeah.
So when did this start happening?
This started happening on my road trip to Houston last week.
Oh
my God, my cat is screaming outside the door right
Don't even worry
now.
about it.
Jesus
Is it
Christ.
possible that you just had a seat warmer in the car, or you were sitting on an animal of some sort?
So I thought that maybe that's what was happening. And so I wasn't sure. I was like, the whole time we were driving, I was like, maybe Jenny has heated seats because I was driving her car. And somehow I just wasn't aware of that fact. So it was a long drive, and I was just like, oh, my butt's just kind of warm. Guess it's got a nice, comfy, butt warmer thing on my seat. And then we actually got there, and I got out of the car, and, I started walking around, and I was like, shit.
That is a hot butt.
My butt is still warm, and only my left butt.
I would say this is a good thing, given that it's December now.
Yeah.
But you live in Texas, so there is no such thing as December.
What about, here's a question. How hot, is it hot to the touch, or is this an internal
Can you burn
sensation?
things with your butt? I think is the question.
Is it either a superpower or a medical problem? All right, so the question is, Adam, is your butt physically hot to the touch, or is this a nerve sensation that we're talking about?
It's a nerve thing. So my butt is normal temperature.
So you're not developing superpowers, you're developing some sort of medical condition.
It just
Exactly.
feels hot.
It just feels
so it's kind of
hot.
like restless leg syndrome, but for your butt.
And has this been
and
constant?
hotness?
It's most of the time, basically. So 2 years ago, on my 28th birthday, actually.
Does this hot butt legacy go back?
It does. It goes back that far. So 2
my
years
God.
ago, I was just sitting on the couch watching TV with my wife, and then all of a sudden I was like, I think my lower leg is numb right now. And indeed, my lower leg was numb. And then it just stayed that way for like 2 months, something like that. Towards the end of that time,
Sounds really serious.
it did. I mean, I got it all checked out and everything. But I learned in that process what I have always learned in these processes, which is that the medical professionals then do a bunch of tests and in the end come back and go, I don't know. And that was the end of it.
So basically, if you can't look it up on WebMD, you're also not going to get it diagnosed.
That's basically
at the
right.
doctor's
Well,
office.
I mean, the deal is it's pretty, well, it's actually funny because, our dad is a surgeon, which I'm not telling you guys because you know that, Sam and Seth.
What
I'm
he
telling
is?
everybody else.
Son bitch lied to
And
me.
so it was funny because I called him when my leg went numb, and I was like, because he's my go-to medical guy, obviously, and I was like, hey, my leg is numb. The fuck? And he asked, well, which part? And I described exactly the region. And he goes, actually, no, that's not even right. I said the lower leg, and he goes, oh. And then he said, is it? And then he described perfectly exactly the region where it was. And I was like, yes, are you some sort of wizard? But it turns out that this is actually a common problem if you have a pinched nerve in your lower back. And so it was basically just a pinched nerve. And the only question then is, well, do you have like a bulging disc that's about to rupture? Because then that's bad. But otherwise, if it's just like a pinched nerve, then it basically just means you got kind of a shitty back, but it's not really like a big deal. So, and that was the end result, which is I got an MRI and all that kind of stuff. And in the end, they were just like, looks like you have a back. And there's nothing in it. It's just a back.
The MRI definitely shows the presence of a back where your back is.
At least the lower back, which is all they looked
doctors.
At least they could read the MRI that well.
That's right.
Inspiring.
I was amazed at how low resolution those images are, though. Yeah, I was like, how do you see anything?
What's the strategy then as far as, cooling the hot butt?
Yeah, so the end of that story was towards the end of it, then I started getting a little bit of the hot butt. But then it kind of just resolved itself. I was basically doing lots of stretching and taking ibuprofen all the time to keep,
Right, get some swelling down or something.
Yeah, get some swelling down. And then it eventually just went away, and who knows if it just resolved itself or if those things did it. And now I'm apparently back in a pure hot butt situation. So I got no numbness.
I think it's just it's a stress-induced hot butt kind of scenario.
It may be. It could also be bad posture and working nonstop related.
No, that sounds. I think it's stress. I don't think bad posture or doing anything physical would have anything.
No, probably not. I guess.
I know things.
I had what I think was a stress-mediated response on Thanksgiving. So I got that stem cell transplant to do the cancer thing to get that done, and one of the results of that is I have graft versus host from time to time, which is where the immune system tries to kill me in various ways. And one of the ways
fails.
Yeah, and fails. And one of the ways it does that is occasionally you'll just get you'll just suddenly get a full body rash. And this actually happened at the dinner table during Thanksgiving. I was telling a story, and then Diana looks over at me and she's like, "Your eye is puffy."
Yeah, it was weird. We all sat down. I noticed it kind of happening. It's weird to see a rash appear
right
in real time. But yeah, so we all sat down at the table and everything was fine. And then Sam starts telling a story, and then I'm like, did he just like have a bunch of acne or something? Yeah. And I just never picked up on it, or nope, just a huge rash appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah, just like boom on my face, on my back and my chest, everything. So I took some Benadryl to make it shut up. But since then, I just have this sort of, it looks like I have some mild acne going on. And the thing is,
you guys are some medical marvels.
Yeah. Oh man.
I'll tell you what.
Healthy as a horse over here.
Somehow we're super old already.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, speaking of your stem cell stuff.
Yeah.
Tomorrow there's a thing.
Yeah. So we got, we're coming up on day 100, which for those not in the know is the first sort of big milestone after getting your transplant. So day 100 is having 100 days of someone else's immune system, basically. So the reason that this is particularly special and perhaps anxiety provoking is that I get a PET scan tomorrow. And the PET scan is what shows if there's any cancer floating around.
When was your last PET scan?
My last PET scan was, right before the donor transplant. And that one was totally clear.
Right.
Which was the first time that had happened since all this stuff happened back in 2013. So,
totally clear, as in no.
There's nothing on. Well, there was a clear damaged muscle in my back from lifting too hard, which the doctor got very sassy with me about.
You often don't see that on PET scans.
Yeah, she was like, "How? What? How?"
No, you played volleyball.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. I played volleyball and I got a little too intense, but yeah. So it's a bit of it's a weird thing where it's an anxiety provoking day, and I guess when most people. About half of our listens come on day 1 from this within a couple hours. So when you guys are listening to this is probably when I'm going to be getting put in the huge tube and having the scan go down. So cross your fingers right now.
Cross
all of the digits, all the limbs,
all your appendages.
Find another person, lay across them. Yeah.
Just find another person,
every
cross
one of
dicks.
your appendages. Yeah. Cross every dongle you've got with some other dongle.
Yeah. And don't worry about the fallout. It's very important. The interesting thing is I was talking to, on Thanksgiving as well, our grandpa came down for Thanksgiving, which is super fun. And he's this, tough as shit old German farmer dude. And he's like, how's your health stuff coming? He's like, you look great. Because I got a beard and stuff, which of course he hasn't seen it in a while. And he's like, you look great. What's going on? And I said, well, I got this day 100 next week, and I've got this PET scan coming up. And he's like, what does that mean? I was like, well, we'll figure out if I have cancer or not still. And he looked at me and he's like, well, I guess it doesn't really matter though, does it? And I was like, no, you're right. It doesn't. Because the only thing that's going to change is I'll be going to the hospital on occasion and being poisoned from time to time. Which sounds like a small, when I say only, perhaps it sounds funny, but it doesn't stop you from doing what you want to do, as it turns out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at with it, I think. So regardless of outcome tomorrow, things
to
will
be
go.
clear,
Yeah,
it's not great.
Right. Right. If that's the case, it's not great.
It's not the best, for sure. And also that's coming from a guy who is so tough that he cut a piece of his finger off recently.
Oh yeah, he did, didn't he?
And exactly. Like, you normally wouldn't say that about somebody who recently cut their finger off. Oh yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
But he's so tough that it didn't even matter that he cut a piece of his finger off.
Well, he also hauled a trailer full of cattle or pigs or something with like 2 broken ribs.
Yeah. He had fallen off the little bridge earlier in the day, broken a bunch of ribs.
He had fallen through a cattle loading ramp.
Right.
Yeah.
Broke 2 ribs and then drove a semi for 12 hours.
Because he had
before
work
going
to
the
do.
hospital. And then he didn't even take any Tylenol.
Oh yeah, he wouldn't take any pain meds.
He was like, nah, I don't really like that stuff.
He didn't want to take pain meds when he cut his finger off.
Yes.
He was
And
like,
also when he had a knee replacement. He had a giant open gash down his leg with blood shooting out of it. And he was just waltzing around as if nothing had happened. So that's where we come from.
That's the cloth we're cut from, I guess.
Yeah. I hope I got at least 1% of that.
Right.
So otherwise though, so tomorrow is day 100 for Sam's stem cell transplant, but also we're past day 100 of playtime for our measly 160 beta testers. So I say measly as a small number, not the people are measly. I don't even know. Measles is not really a thing anymore, guys.
Thank God.
Yeah. Well, unless they haven't been vaccinating because they're anti-vaxxers, in which case, knock that shit off, you idiots.
Yeah.
But importantly, it's been 9 days of total sort of availability of crash lands. And in that time are 62 testers, something like that. But we're at 113 days of playtime.
That's pretty good. And so you also have to bear in mind that not all of our invited testers actually have been able to play much. In the first few days, we were having a fair number of pretty frequent crashes on some devices.
Especially Mac and iOS.
Especially Mac and iOS, which we've gotten worked out. But of course, a lot of our testers rushed to the beta right out of the gate and they're like, yeah, I'm going to play it. And then it was crashing. And they're like, oh, and then they forgot about it.
Yeah.
So we have a number of people who haven't picked it back up again after the crash fest at the beginning. 113 days of playtime across 160 people over 9 days.
So, and if we take and we look at excluding testers of less than 30 minutes, which we assume either they don't like the game up front or probably it just crashed like crazy on them. The average playtime per person is 17 hours. So people have essentially done like a part-time job worth of play of the game in the past week. And the record holder currently sits at 68 hours. And that's Entagon.
Which is pretty good.
Pretty much crushing it.
People playing the crap out.
I believe he changed his portrait in the chat to a picture of one of the plants, which is called a hardcore. And it says, I'm so, and then it's a picture of the plant.
A picture of the hardcore.
And I think the crazier thing is that so again, like the whole point of this is to get feedback, right? And we built a bunch of tools that are integrated directly into the game that allow people to leave feedback notes whenever they see something that's weird, bugs, story, glitches, anything. And also upvote other people's things. And then also leave comments.
Yeah, I was going to say, we didn't just build tools, we built Reddit.
Yeah, we basically built Reddit feedback.
We built a bug reporting version of Reddit on our own site.
And the best part of it, so the goal was to sort of reduce friction for people to actually give us feedback, because that's the whole point, right? We want to know everything. And so I would certainly call it a success, which is that as of current, in total upvotes and tickets combined, there's been 1,676 interactions with that. So that's either I believe there's 1,004 tickets that have been sent in total, and then about 600 something upvotes on various tickets. And then further, you can actually leave comments on stuff so people can, chime in with their opinion on something if someone's suggesting a thing or an alternate version of what they saw, of a version of a bug. And there's been 363 comments so far. And
pretty good.
It's insane. And there's three of us managing this in the background.
Our to-do list is awful right now.
It's a little long at present. It's getting shorter.
Well, but it's getting shorter because we like to do things fast. We've been hitting as many of the sort of easier to fix bugs right out of the gate, getting all the crashes fixed, and also implementing some new features and stuff like that. And trying to respond to all this feedback as best we can. So far, we've hit 15 pages of single-spaced 11-point font patch notes, which is across, we're now working on the 8th patch. So we've put out 7 patches in 9 days on this beta. So we are making really good progress, getting lots of great insight from our players and fixing a whole bunch of cool stuff.
Right. And I think we've just started moving on, just as a quick update as to where we're at is moving on to the sort of weirder bugs that have been harder to nail, a little more slippery. And that's kind of
like, for example, we forgot to hit the checkbox that turns on Steam for Mac users. So,
sorry, guys, there's literally a checkbox.
So Mac users have been having all kinds of trouble with just weird things that made no sense. We're like, what is the deal? And then Adam was like, is there a checkbox for this? And I looked, and sure enough, there is a checkbox.
Yeah.
So
I think
Mac users, you guys should be having a much better experience.
It's mostly, as far as I know, it's only going to impact your ability to sync your saves, unless there's other stuff.
Which is kind of a big one.
Absolutely.
And get perks and have leaderboards and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's been particularly weird because we've had a lot of people say that they can't sync on Mac, but we also know that the UI that we have for dealing with synced saves is crap. And so we couldn't tell, like, is it the UI and then it wasn't everybody.
What's up with these Mac users not being able to understand our UI?
Right.
Jeez.
It wasn't everyone on Mac. And so then that was where the confusion came in. And it turned out that the reason was that if somebody played on Mac and on Windows, then just playing a single time on Windows was sufficient to allow their save syncing to work, even on Mac. And so most of our testers have both.
Because it buttered them up automatically on Steam.
Yeah, it unlocked their access to all the save syncing features. And so that's why we were so confused, because like half of our Mac testers are like, this definitely doesn't work, and the other half are like, works great.
Oh man.
And nobody there's a key piece of information that, because all that most of our testers would say is doesn't work, right? Which because
that's all they know.
Because that's all they know, yeah. And for us, we're like, what the fuck? We don't know what to do with that, right? So we dig into every kind of thing we can imagine, and this was like the one thing that we just didn't think about. And then it turned out, there you go. That was the problem.
Checkbox.
My favorite bug that we've heard about so far was from one of our testers, who said...
Duh83 specifically.
Who managed to... He was fighting a Vama, and the Vamas are these huge frog beast things that basically their head sort of folds completely backward, and they just vomit out a bunch of artillery tadpoles. And usually it's 3 to 5 at a time. And he apparently had one of these things was attacking him, and he hit his map button in the middle of being attacked by it.
Which pauses the game.
Yeah, cruised around the map for a little bit, just chilling out. Closed the map, and when he came back in, somehow, the Vama had continuously been spewing artillery that had not been... So the artillery basically would be spawned, but hadn't, started traveling. Because
time stops when the map opens.
So as soon as he closed the map, this Vama's 50 to 60 artillery spread comes flying at him. All at once.
It's not the best thing to see when you close your map.
Apparently he survived that, which is impressive. It's impressive juke.
He said it was low level. He probably had good armor. But speaking of Duh83, in our last podcast, we mistakenly attributed an idea to BSB 333 when it was actually Duh83. And that idea was to put circles on the map instead of saying, walk east in a random period of distance, whatever, and then eventually you may or may not stumble across the thing we want you to stumble across.
Which has now been fully implemented. It's pretty, and also they have labels.
Yeah.
And it works great.
We got lots of good player feedback once we implemented that, so thanks to Duh83 for suggesting it, and now things are better.
Yeah, super better.
So otherwise we're just kind of jamming on trying to replicate all these really hard to find bugs and just all kinds of stuff. And it's to a point now where there are some bugs that are so weird that we've implemented a new feature in the game called the Bork Fixer.
Yep. Fixes Borks.
Because we got this philosophy where some things in a game can be broken, which basically means it's not working as intended, and you can just go in and fix the problem, right? You can replicate it. It's broken. Now you fixed it. The end. And then there are some things that get borked, which means they work almost all the time, and then sometimes they just don't, completely inexplicably. So on the loading screen of Crashlands, we now have a fixing Borks stage where it'll dig through your save file and look for problems. Like we've had people with pets disappearing. So after 113 days of playtime, suddenly we had a couple people have their pets disappear. So the Bork Fixer fixes that. It recovers lost eggs. So there'll be all kinds of things that it'll stitch up, which is good. It saves us a lot of headache of trying to just track those things down.
Yeah, and for a lot of these, the hope is that once we actually can collect enough information to find the actual problem, then we can fix the problem directly.
Fix the problem, yeah. Until then, we got to work around the Bork.
Exactly. Yes, we can use the Bork Fixer instead.
So, also we had there was an interesting article in Forbes this past week on single player games. Sam, did you want to talk about that a bit?
So the article is it was actually about Fallout 4 and The Witcher. And the focus of the article was, okay, we're hitting the end of the year here, and what you're going to see is basically his point was that what you're going to see is at the top of all the game of the year lists, weirdly, is going to be all of the single player games. So Witcher, Fallout 4, and then whatever other like big ones of those came out. Far Cry or, whatever. And his point was that while this is weird, it's weird that the single player, sort of those big single player experiences are oftentimes looked down upon, in the publishing circuit. Like it's harder to get one published. It's harder to get backing for one. And people's primary complaint with him is always that they want multiplayer. It's actually been the primary feature that people request in Crashlands, is multiplayer. And this whole structure of this article is basically talking about what it is about single player games that actually is so valuable, and then also how the market is proving that is just not going away. And so he dives into, Fallout 4 and The Witcher versus experiences in things like, League of Legends or even World of Warcraft, which does have a huge questing component to it, or other huge MMO spaces. And I think this prompted an interesting conversation between Seth and I just in the kitchen where we were talking about where we want to go as a studio. And this does also lead into the first question that we got asked this week a bit, which is from Inspector 42, who asked, do you ever see yourself growing beyond a 3-person team? Back when you were a 2-person team, did you anticipate growing to a 3-person team? So I wanted to talk about kind of where we think we want to go with Butterscotch as of now. Before Crashlands launches, I think it's going to be interesting to have this conversation recorded. Launch Crashlands, see what the fallout is.
So we can look back on it and be embarrassed.
To be super embarrassed about our folly. So what do you guys think about that? How do we want to grow the studio? What's your thoughts on the kind of single player tradition after making what is it's a 40-hour game. It's a 40-hour game. And someone else mentioned, they were like, I think it was Bean, one of our testers mentioned, he's like, I bet Crashlands 4 is going to be in 3D. And I was like, no, it's not. And he goes, hey, the first Fallout was in 2D.
Yeah.
The first two.
First two of them. Yeah.
And I was like, I guess they were. So I guess where do you guys see us going? What's, as far as growing beyond a 3-person team, what do you see there? And in light of Crashlands and this idea of single player being a thing that's not quite, not a big thing in the industry, despite the fact that it's the biggest thing oftentimes in the industry, if that makes sense.
To me, this actually kind of goes along with what we talk about a lot when we're talking about game design issues, and especially in the context of player feedback, like in a beta, which is that, there's a huge difference between playing a game and thinking, oh, it'd be cool if it had X, right? Mm-hmm. And then trying to design a game so that it actually has that thing. And in many cases, the thing that sounds cool kind of at a glance turns out to break a game fundamentally or change it so fundamentally that it's just not the same thing anymore. And multiplayer is one of those huge changes that just it only can work in certain kinds of games in the first place. And in order for it to work, a game has to be designed with multiplayer at its core. Otherwise, like, you can't just tack it on. It doesn't make any sense to do that.
What would you say about something like Terraria, though, as a sort of counterpoint to a degree with that?
Well, to me, Terraria is a multiplayer game.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not actually fun as a single player game, but there's a reason for that. And that reason is that the only thing you can do is craft stuff, right? The combat is challenging, but not in an interesting way. It's challenging because things have lots of hit points. Mm-hmm. Or they throw lots of stuff at you, right? But there isn't a lot of, it's mostly just about always getting the next best thing, and then you go fight, right? The part that makes it fun is when you go into multiplayer and everybody's doing different stuff. You're building these giant, cavernous bases and fighting things together.
Well, I think the multiplayer component actually, it allows you to make something that's effectively a toy, without having to dump really very many resources into it. So I think about what Minecraft is, which is an extremely lightweight and content light modding engine, right? Where most of what people do in Minecraft is they download a whole bunch of different mods that add all kinds of interesting stuff to the game, and then they play with their friends. If you were to just download Minecraft as is and play it completely by yourself and never play with anybody, it kind of loses steam pretty quickly.
Well, yeah, the world feels actually very empty. It feels socially empty because there's nothing to talk to. There's no story.
Yeah, you have no reason for being there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've been thinking more about kind of so I think Terraria and Minecraft are pretty cool as multiplayer games because of the sort of co-op nature of them. In the sense that, you get on there with your buddy, and unless you specifically go onto one of those, modded servers where it's like a first person shooter in Minecraft or whatever, that's a different story. But, I've been thinking about, somebody made a comment about this article, which was basically something like, there are two really big memories that stand out to me in gaming. And, one is from single player and one is from multiplayer. And the single player one is the first time I saw the Deku tree was Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
And the second one was when Blaze Kid 420 in Call of Duty told me that he fucked my mom. It's just like because like once you bring a human element into an adversarial multiplayer game, then the gameplay experience
sucks.
It spirals out of control, right? And so I even think about things like Hearthstone. Why is it that people love playing Hearthstone so much? Is it possible that one of the contributors to that is that players aren't allowed to talk to each other? All you can do is you can only use predefined emotes. I believe there's 6 of them or something. So you can just be like, hello, or thank you, or that's about it, right? So Blizzard was like, okay, we have a competitive game, and that's all it is. The whole game is fight each other. And we want everybody to play this. How do we make that work? I know. Make it seem as if you're not actually playing against another human being by not letting them talk to you.
Yeah.
And then it's enjoyable all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we've seen this actually with League of Legends just announced I think a couple of days ago. They're adding like a bunch of interesting features to the game in next year, and they're actually locking trolls out of all those features.
Yeah.
So there's like a little crafting component and some like skin, just like a bunch of interesting things that they're adding. But basically if you've gotten enough negative reports, you literally don't get to participate anymore because they know 100% that their biggest problem is just the fact
is their players.
Is their player base tends to be negative. And it's not because, and I guess the interesting thing is it's a natural consequence of putting people into adversarial relationships, right? And so I think what the interesting thing that we had discussed about Crashlands in particular, there are a few ideas that we've kicked around, which are very much, on the back burner. So don't expect any of these to actually happen. But it's fun ideas that we kicked around as far as how to integrate people's, that social element into the game with more of a sort of cooperative piece to it and more of a sort of world building piece to it without having to completely overhaul the game and add in the actual physicality of another person being in it with you. Yeah. Because that's technically it'd be a better idea for us just to make Crashlands 2, frankly, as far as time input.
That's the more likely scenario
Right.
anyway.
Exactly.
I mean, actually, I loathe most competitive multiplayer games unless I'm playing them with people I know who aren't assholes.
Right. Same here, actually. I actually don't play League of Legends unless I play with my friend who lives across the hall.
Yeah.
At which point it's kind of like playing a co-op game.
It is. Yeah.
With your friend.
Exactly. I like multiplayer when it's co-op. And even competitive can be okay, but the fact is that the vast majority of people in any kind of relationship, whether it's, you with your spouse or your best friend or some rando you barely met, the vast majority of people just don't respond well in competition. Mm-hmm. It's just a fact. Like people, they want to win, and then they get pissed when they're not winning, and then they take that out on themselves or others in all kinds of ways. Why have that be a thing? There's no reason that we need to.
Yeah, I think we're not particularly interested in making those things, I guess.
Yeah. Well, especially if you think about our don't be a jerk policy, the more I've thought about this, the more I've come to believe that we cannot have a don't be a jerk policy and also have an adversarial competitive multiplayer game.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't have any players.
Right.
We wouldn't have enough to support the game.
To support the server costs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I want to make games that bring people together and don't put them against each other.
Well, we talked about this with regards to, so one of the biggest events on a cooperative scale that I think, that we've seen in the gaming sphere that's been so impressive was the Gates of Encourage opening in World of Warcraft. And what that required was literally the entire server's worth of one faction. So your horde or alliance, to basically cooperatively collect just a vast amount of resources to put towards what they call this war effort. And this is the idea that sort of spawned that system that we built in Narwhal Online, the Game Jam game, where as players sort of collectively collected a particular resource, that information got sent up to the server would check where the entire global population was in collection of that resource, and then would unlock additional content in the game based on that. And that aspect, I think, is something like doing things on a huge scale or sort of for a greater purpose is one of the really cool things that I don't think has been explored, frankly, very well. Despite the fact that it would be one of the best things and the easiest things to explore in the gaming space.
Well, and what's even kind of hilarious about that Encourage thing is for the average person, it was a really cool, inspiring community event. But there was one person who could ring the gong to finish the event and open up the gates, or just a handful of people on the entire server of tens of thousands of people. And in order to get that item to do that, you basically had to step on a lot of people. Guilds disbanded because of this. People attacked each other on the forum. I mean, it was really, really brutal and messy. So because of the fact that you had this community event, but you also had a scarce,
you had adversarial event on top.
So suddenly it becomes a every man for himself kind of a scenario. So we definitely would need to avoid that aspect.
And I think going back to the question of the predominance of single player games at the top of a lot of Game of the Year lists, despite the fact that they're very rarely made, just compared to, I mean, look at Star Wars Battlefront. Easiest example of one of those things that people are like, why didn't you do?
What happened?
What happened, man? Where did the story go? It's literally just multiplayer.
It has, I think it has one game mode that people actually play, which has 4 maps.
Right.
And it's a $60 or $50 game.
Well,
it's
and
cool.
probably was $100 million to make or something like that.
Something ridiculous, I'm sure.
Probably just the licensing fees.
That's probably true.
To slap the Star Wars name on it.
And I think when it comes down to it, I guess as far as where we think we're going as a studio, I think we'd like to make what are essentially, these larger storytelling, single player games that have some really sort of smart and positive social component to them that can be opted into, right? So, or as maybe forms the core of it in a really positive sense, like the Narwhal Online method.
And we want to come up with some mechanism in some nearby future game of creating a sort of guild system through Butterscotch ID.
Yeah.
Which we've talked about a bit in the past. So far, there's no serious plans on the table to do it, but it's always sort of at the forefront of our thoughts of how do we get people to really form together as communities.
Yeah, and the big thing right now is we don't yet have anything in the Butterscotch ID universe of games that you can do as a community. So that next step will kind of both shape and dictate, and depend on what we decide to do for the next kinds of games.
What do you guys think about as far as growing beyond 3 people? Because I think we've gotten a lot of interesting feedback from our testers. I mean, we've been working our asses off the last week, obviously with the beta stuff, and the week before that. But we've got a lot of interesting points where people are like, "How are you guys handling this?" I mean, we have this bajillion long list of feedbacks, and also somehow managing to do the podcast and keep on top of this other stuff and prep for PR things and everything else. And so, what do you guys think as far as this question of growing beyond a 3-person team?
To me, it's the same as what the 3 of us have talked about in the past internally, which is I like the rate and the scope of the things that we can and want to produce. And I don't like the idea of making things that are so big we can't just kind of have our hands in all of it, Right.
It's fun to be there for every piece.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to look at the thing and be like, this is really my responsibility. Like, I created this thing.
Yeah, I can't really imagine putting myself into a position where I don't have my hands inside the guts of the game on a daily basis.
You're so handsy, Seth.
But I think we had talked about basically the next move would be to hire some people to handle the more administrative side of stuff. Mm-hmm. And maybe some of the PR side and the part that's not making games, that we would look at expanding the studio to do that. I mean, there are a whole bunch of really cool things that we want to do that also just themselves expand outside of games, like merchandise, and cross promotion and cross branding and that sort of thing. And, we just don't have the time or resources to do that on top of making games.
It may be the case that if Crashlands goes extremely well, then we just won't have to worry about the amount of time it takes to do X, Y, or Z thing.
Yeah, I mean, though it always is the case that any time we spend doing that is not spent towards the next game. Exactly. So while it is true that we could afford to do it, it does always come at the cost of the next game.
Right. So I think we want to maintain a pretty solid rate of output, which to us basically means, I think in a sense, figuring out how to create an additional layer of support around the idea of getting these games done and making
it's basically
like editing the podcast, for example.
I honestly have to say, after working on Crashlands, with just bearing in mind that when we came into developing Crashlands as a 2-person team, we had absolutely no way to do it with all the things that we wanted to do in the game. There was just no way that we were going to pull this off. But instead of just being discouraged by it, we just did a bunch of research for each item. And I feel like it's that line at the end of The Martian, which, spoiler alert, he gets off of Mars, where he says, at a certain point, everything is going to go south on you, and you're going to basically just be like, oh shit, this is it for me. Right. And then you just start solving problems. And you solve the next problem and the next problem and the next problem. And pretty soon you've solved enough problems and you're done, right? Which is kind of what happened with us at the beginning of Crashlands. We just kind of hit a point where suddenly we solved all the problems. And now we have a game, right? So.
I mean, it's an analogy in a lot of ways to the cancer diagnosis shit too, right? I mean, it's
just one thing at a time.
How do I do this? And then it's, well, go talk to this person, now get your sides cut open, now go get some drugs, get that done. And then if it doesn't work, which it fucking didn't the first time, then here's some other things to do. And if it doesn't work again, we're going to keep on doing stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, in thinking about what we've been able to do with Crashlands, just by approaching it in this very piecemeal, step-by-step fashion, not getting overwhelmed, just looking at each new, obstacle as actually an opportunity to learn something cool. We've made something that's so huge that a lot of our testers have asked us how it's possible that we actually did this. as a
and
team of this size.
we sort of are in a little bit of disbelief ourselves.
But the thing is, it seems crazy because it's so big, but at the same time, it's just an amalgamation of
It's just a bunch of small things,
of tiny parts, right?
Yeah.
So in thinking about it from that perspective, I honestly I can't imagine anymore a game project that we would come up with where I would sit back and go, yeah, we need another person to do that.
Right.
Like, I can't imagine what we would try to do
after building something of this scope, you mean?
Yeah. Because,
Right.
I mean, we could build something twice as big as this, in 2 years now, because now we know more, right? We've been through it. We've learned a lot of things, and, we have a lot of new technologies at hand. We have Adam, who's great at automating things for us.
Well, that's been the biggest crazy thing is the story element addition was just nuts, because our plan originally was like, okay, well, shit, I guess we'll just make 3 boss fights. That was the original plan. It was 1 boss fight at the end of each zone, because we didn't have the tech in place to be able to reliably do anything. And now it's 50,000 words.
Yeah, and when we were at Indie PopCon, which was in July, so 5 months ago, we didn't have any aspect of the Crashlands creator hooked up to the game at all. And actually, the Crashlands creator was not quite finished at that point.
Right. The tutorial was actually hard-coded, right?
I manually coded the tutorial to get it ready for Indie PopCon and just forced it to exist. And so 5 months later, we have the Crashlands creator is finished, and we have 50,000 words worth of story in the game. So we basically have a novel. So of course, if you were to just sit down and go, I'm going to write a 50,000 word story, you're not going to do it. But if you spread it out over a couple months, if you just every day, you just chip away at it, it just gets done. So, I mean, it's been really good. Crashlands has been really good, I think, for us to just learn how to not be intimidated by absolutely anything.
Right. And I do think the other important piece here is that in my mind, there's a big piece of growth as far as growing beyond the 3-person team, which actually has to do nothing with hiring more people and more on growing the community to be a more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
A more powerful source of both content with stuff like the Crashlands creator. But then also just in terms of, we like to think of the people who actually play our games and our fans, as pretty solidly as partners in this sort of enterprise, because again, as a 3-person team, like when we do this beta testing, all 3 of us played through the entire game, and fixed every bug that we saw, and we were like, this seems like it's good to ship, but I guess we'll
this
beta
thing
test
is
it.
bug free.
Holy shit. 1,600 notes of feedback later. No, it's not. Absolutely
It's not even close to bug free.
And the truth of the matter is that ability to pull on the community for that aspect, and really, frankly, get like empowered and picked up by that, 170 people is so huge. And I'm wondering, I think it'd be really fun to explore other ways of leveraging that community power to something really, really, really cool and impressive.
Yeah. Well, if we have people who are really pumped and want to get more involved, and, they like what we are creating and they want to see more of it happen and help us in any way that they can, then, we will happily take that help.
Yeah. We just have to figure out how to make it easy for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get on to the next question.
Sure.
And also, these questions come from podcast.bscotch.net. These are asked by Bscotch ID members, and you can also vote for questions on there. So we just kind of go down the list and pick the most top upvoted questions from each week. So the next question for today is from Gafferman with 11 upvotes. Gafferman says, will the world in Crashlands loop around melon style, or will it be one large flat surface with a reachable end, pizza style? Okay, I have to say, though, this is wrong on 2 counts. Okay.
I already know where you're going with this.
The first one is that it would be a weird pizza if it was pizza style because it's a rectangle.
Yeah, but there are rectangular pizzas.
There are rectangular pizzas.
But there are not that many rectangular pizzas that are the size of the Netherlands.
It's true.
Not enough.
Not enough of them, anyway.
Yeah.
I think there are cookies of that size. But
I hope so.
So when you see a game where you walk off the top, and you emerge from the bottom, right? So think any map in like a Final Fantasy game. You walk off the top of the map, you come off the or Pac-Man, even.
Right, easiest example, yeah.
Yeah. You move off the right side, you emerge from the left. That is actually not a melon shape. The only geometric shape that movement type would work with is a donut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to leave it at that because it's kind of, every time I tell people this, they don't believe me. So just look it up. I think on Google you could just type in something like game world maps are donuts or something. And you can see exactly how it's put together. It's really interesting.
So yeah, I guess to recap, Crashlands is a huge rectangular pizza.
Yep.
It is pizza style.
Most games,
it's huge rectangular pizza.
Most games that have any sort of looping from screen to screen, they're donuts, actually.
They're donuts.
Melons are getting left out in the cold.
Yeah.
There's very few melons in gaming.
No, we should also add a
Kerbal
note
Space
here.
Program has melons.
That's probably true. We should add a note here, though, which is that the world of Crashlands is big enough that it might as well be an infinite plane.
Right.
Well, you could get to the edges of it in several hours.
Yeah, if you walk
running.
straight and don't interact with anything for several hours.
What, like 7-10 hours? I don't know.
No, I think
takes a
it's
while.
actually only like 3 or 4 hours if you don't interact
okay.
with anything.
Yeah, and if you can
get
make a
to it.
straight shot.
Yeah. So if you really wanted to, you could get there. I mean, there's not a great reason to do it, but if you
We
really
should add
want
an
to,
achievement for it, though, I think.
we should probably do something. We talked about doing something weird once you got to the end.
Well, we were going to spawn a wall of death that just slowly encroached upon the land for fun.
Yeah, but the great thing, the great thing about it though is, you will have explored less than probably 100% of the map at that point. Probably less than 1,000% of the map. So good luck on that one. All right. So next question comes from Mia Kitty, number 1 Australia fan, with 10 upvotes. She says, "So," is all caps. "So, who did the web stuff before Adam joined? Or was he always unofficially official web developer?"
I was not.
He was not. Adam was getting his PhD. He
I
didn't
was
have time
busy.
for
He was doing science.
that. I was the web person before, but I can program in all the web languages.
All of them.
Well, the 5 that matter, put it that way. So HTML, PHP, CSS, JavaScript, and MySQL. Is that 5?
That's the set.
Is that the set? And weirdly, in web programming, in order to build really interesting reactive websites, you need to do that. But importantly, just like how we use GameMaker, we never rolled anything ourselves until Adam got on board, because we wanted to build games, not websites for the games. So we used Blogger to host butterscotchshenanigans.com, and I basically just, even as it is today, it's still actually just an extremely modified template.
It was all hacking.
Yeah. So that's how I would always describe my coding. I think Adam actually programs.
No, it's still mostly hacking. But
Okay. All of us just kind of hack stuff together.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the answer to the question.
We do stuff until it works, and then we don't touch it.
And we used to use CreateSend for our newsletter as well, which now we roll our own engine in the background for that too.
Yeah. I personally, for me, the internet is just a series of mystery tubes.
yeah.
I don't know what's going in or what's coming out. So
I mean, I only barely know, but it's progress.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but you're at that stage where you know enough to know what you don't know.
That's true.
I don't even know that much. I feel like there's a point in your life where once you've learned some things, you feel like you know everything. And then once you learn a little bit more, you realize you don't know anything at all.
Yeah.
So I'm still way early on that peak. Okay, next question comes also from Mia. We got a Mia Kitty quadruple play on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Also, and they all have 10 upvotes. So,
Nice.
I don't know. Seems suspicious. Mia Kitty asks, "What devices do you test your games on? Have you got extra devices to try with to make sure they work, or is that the sole reason you require beta testers?"
It is one of the big reasons we require beta testers.
It's definitely not the sole reason.
Yeah, obviously. At this point, we used to, when we was just like Quadrupus, it was one of the big reasons we needed beta testers, because we didn't have the upfront capital to actually just go buy, $2,000 worth of various devices that were going to go obsolete in 6 months.
Quadrupus was tested on my wife's iPhone 4 that she got from her work.
Yeah. So,
And then your Android devices.
right.
And my Galaxy S3.
All of us have Android devices, and then we bought a Mac so we can actually test on the Mac and build for the Mac.
And Seth and I both have iPod 5s.
Right.
that we test
which
our
sucks
iOS builds.
because apparently what I thought was that the iPod 5 had the same overall general tech specs as the iPhone 5.
Just not a phone.
It does not. The
Nope.
iPod 5 only has 512 megabytes of RAM, which is enough to run the OS and one super tiny thing.
Yeah.
It can't actually run Crashlands.
Yeah, Crashlands requires 1 gig of RAM total on the device.
So all of the iOS testing has been done so far. So whenever we send a build out, we don't actually know if it works.
Yeah, because Crashlands chills at like 250 megabytes of RAM. But when really intense things are happening, like when campaign files are being unpacked or loading's happening or something, it can spike into like the 300 range. And then at that point, if your device only has 512 megabytes of RAM, you're done. So that means every iOS build that we've put out of Crashlands, we haven't actually been
untested
able to,
by us.
We haven't been able to test internally.
And this is certainly a process hole for us.
But after Crashlands launches, maybe we'll be able to actually
Splurge.
get a new iOS.
Afford
Get a new
afford
iOS
a better
device.
Yeah. One of my, I guess, tasks for the week is to see if I can figure out how to reduce some of the memory requirements. Because if we can, we might make it actually playable on iPod 5s and similarly low spec devices. We'll see. Who knows?
Okay, so next question also comes from me, Kitty 10 up votes number 1 Australia fan. Me, Kitty. Purple Monkey Dishwasher, Bad Boys. That's. I'm not just making shit up. That's the first part. I love the creative and awesome tastical names you give things. Weirdest catchphrase you've heard and or come up with, and have a random word party on air and we'll vote for the best one.
It's putting us on the spot.
Yeah, so we don't really... Most of our creative ideas come from just slapping two things together.
Slapping our sticks
Basically.
together, essentially. Our word sticks.
Yeah. Another time where weird things tend to emerge is after we've been working on a thing for dozens and dozens of hours, and we just have no juice left, and whatever word salad comes shooting out of our salad shooters, that's what lands in the game.
I think if you want a good example of another good example of this, Olin Rogers, his videos are fantastic on YouTube, and his sort of speech style feels very similar. And apparently what he does, so I think all of us are kind of, after a brief period of time, if we're trying to come up with a name for something, essentially just the filter comes off completely. And so the really weird word associations start going, and then funny things happen.
It's typos, misspoken things, and then word associations that like we just kind of let continue along their paths until they become something entertaining.
It's almost like that experience you often hear about where somebody goes boozing too hard and then they wake up the next morning next to somebody and then they gotta face the music. That's kind of how we roll with our game.
I mean, for example, there's a weapon in Talfight. There's a projectile called the Shaloke.
Oh yeah.
So I believe I think the grip is wrong.
Some kind of a clam with a knife for a tongue.
Yeah, it's a clam with a knife tongue. This is apparently a thing that is on the planet of Wonope. But the creation of the name for that was actually because I think when I sent the image to Seth, I just quickly, I was trying to type clamshell, I think, and just completely, like, my fingers were just in the wrong place on the keyboard.
But then you were just like, fuck it, and you just sent it to me anyway.
So Seth was like, Shaloke? The hell is this? And I was like, I don't know, it's what it is. And he's like, all right.
Yep, that's true. That is what that is.
So that's where they come
now
from.
a Shaloke.
Yeah, and actually I think if you want another example of words coming out of exhaustion, just listen to last week's podcast. I think at several points I was trying to say some things and I just gave up mid-word and just crammed some syllables in there, including anniversarand, which I've never said before. Probably will never say again.
Probably not.
All right, the last question of the day also comes from me, Canadian More Australia fan me. 10 upvotes. Having now undergone this kill the cancer roller coaster ride twice now, this is for you, Sam. What advice would you give to someone just starting? And how would or could you make that into a fun, educational game to help others struggling to deal? 10% profits if you do make it.
Well,
Wait, if we answer this question, are we agreeing to that last stipulation?
This is legally binding. We're gonna lawyer up.
All we have to
Hit the
do is
gym.
just, before we start talking, say we don't agree. Right?
Yeah, 5%.
That's how law works, I'm pretty sure.
If you listen to the show regular, you know that Crashlands came out of the diagnosis. So in a big way, this is the game that is designed to help other people. It's just not designed to do so in an overt, oh, you're killing cancer way, except for if you've made it to the bog, the intensive treatments quest.
True.
Which you should investigate.
Is that quest broken or does it work right now?
It works now. I
Okay,
think so.
cool.
So you can kill a massive cancer in Crashlands if you'd like. But the whole point of the game, the design of the game is it's built to be a large scale thing that if you're going through some shit, that will just be so fun and enjoyable that you will forget. And I think that's kind of why it exists as the point of the game in the first place. It doesn't have any educational component aside from the fact that you know, on a theme level, you got this person in the game, Flux, who's just trying to do her damn job and gets roped into essentially an epic level, conquest, which is again a sort of small metaphor for just going through something like cancer, where you're just trying to do your thing, and then Hugo Dooku appears, so to speak.
So what would be the best? What would be like the one core nugget of badassery that you would pull out of that? Like out of the whole 2 years now of going through all these treatments and whatever, like what is a thing that you could just give to a person if they just got it like diagnosed today?
Well, I think that the most important thing to do is to just not stop doing whatever you're doing. In the sense that kind of like what we talked about earlier when I was chatting with Grandpa, and he was like, well, I guess it doesn't matter either way. You know, if tomorrow comes and you got cancer again, apparently, then yeah, that particular aspect of your life has certainly been changed. There's going to be a lot of upheaval and a lot of crap going on. But at the same time, in most cases, you're still going to have the power to do whatever it is that you actually want to do. And in many cases, the urgency of that fact is going to become crystal clear to you. And the fact that you weren't using your time well previously is going to be a really painful realization. So if anything, the cancer acts as this clarifier that the only thing that has ever been stopping you from doing what it is that you want to do is you. And you can pin the blame on a good variety of things, but at the end of the day, you can still be a total badass in your work, in your love life, in your friendship circles, whatever else, when you're dealing with something as ridiculously life upheaving as a cancer diagnosis. And I think that to me is the thing that I see I've talked to so many people, because I have people reach out every so often when I do a Facebook post or something like that who have just gotten diagnosed, and they ask a similar question, which is, how did you maintain what appears to be an extremely positive outlook, the entire time? They're like, I know I don't know you, but I read all your posts and it looks like you didn't have that terrible of a time. And the truth is I didn't, but it wasn't because it's an easy thing to do. It's because I refused to not do the things that I wanted to do. And essentially what ended up happening was
you just decided to have a good time.
Right. Well, I decided to actually do everything that I was trying to do more, is the truth. I saw my friends more. I saw my family more. I changed the project I was working on, by working with you guys and focusing on making something that mattered. And it was a huge, the first time around, honestly felt like a big, gift in a lot of ways. Frankly, I do wish it would have stopped there, because doing it twice is not really necessary. But
yeah, twice.
You just need the one.
Yeah, you just
one and
honestly,
done.
you just need the one. Having to do it again, not a particularly good thing I'm interested in doing. Also, my headphones are shorting out.
Oh God!
I had a couple weeks ago. My headphones were actually shocking my ear holes.
Trying to move it. It's just shocking me.
Not yet.
Okay, hang on.
Shit.
I have to wonder. So, Adam, I have a question for you, kind of about this. Do you think that if Sam hadn't gotten his first diagnosis, if none of this cancer shit had ever happened, do you think you would have joined Butterscotch?
I don't know. I mean, that was definitely a large part of the impetus.
Because I kind of got the sense that for you it was kind of like, I want to do stuff with my brothers now.
Right.
Like I want to be around while all this shit is happening. And so the easiest way for that to happen was to jump on board with the company.
Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely most of the incentive. So, yeah, I mean, My guess is that I probably would have just stuck along the path, just stuck with my inertia, right? Just stayed on the path that I was going on. But because of all the shit that was going on, I was like...
So in an interesting way, just as it was a sort of a catalyst or a crystallizer for Sam, it did the same thing for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, because for me, like, I like games and I like making games, but even still, it was never that's still not my primary interest. My primary interest is actually running a fun company with my family, and then the games are the thing that the games are like what we're doing, right? But that part isn't the important part. And so for me to leave doing science to go make games was never quite what it was. And without having that strong, I guess more drive to need to go do it, I probably would have just been stuck with it. I mean, I have absolutely no regrets. And if anything, like, it's worked out very much in my favor to do it. But even still, inertia is a powerful thing, especially when you're on a track like an academic track, because I spent a long fucking time in school, and then I was, in a PhD program, and like the next steps in that are all just really, really long. And the easiest thing, actually, I mean, it always sounds like to people, talking about other people doing medicine or PhDs and that kind of stuff, they're like, oh, that sounds so hard and like so much work. And it's actually, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's actually the easy path, because all you do is you get on it and then just keep on working.
You just follow the steps that have been laid out.
Exactly. You just keep on following the steps. And so for me to leave those was weird. And while I didn't have a particular plan in mind, what I most likely would have done would just be to stay on the path.
Right.
Yeah. So, we got blessings and curses.
Well, thanks, Cancer, you piece of shit.
Yeah, fucking cancer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's good can come out of it.
For sure.
So
Crashlands certainly did. It seems like it might be pretty good.
Might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job, Sam. Okay. Well, anyway, guys, that's all we got time for. So we'll end on that weird cacophony of racket. So this has been Coffee with Butterscotch, and we are Butterscotch Shenanigans. If you want to check out our games, head over to games.bscotch.net. Play the crap out of those. And of course, we have all kinds of newsletter and all kinds of other stuff. So get yourself a Bscotch ID, get signed up. And we also have a great community over at forums.bscotch.net. So come on over there and say hello, and we will possibly, wave back. And that's all we got, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.